So a compact 60% size keyboard with arrow keys just came in the mail. Let's talk about it. Today we'll be looking at the GEEK SK64S, which was sent out to me by Banggood Sama, but this won't affect my review in any way, shape, or form. For some reason the box is labeled Skylong, but I don't know, so let's take a look inside. You're gonna get the keyboard, a USB-A to USB-C cable, a keycap puller, a switch puller because this keyboard is hot swappable, some keycaps for the bottom row in case you're a Mac user, and a manual. Now I got the white and pink version, but there's other color choices as well as other switch choices. Link in the description. Now the SK64S has the same form factor as the GK64, essentially being a 60% board with a squeezed in format so it can fit in arrow keys, shrinking the left shift to be a 2U size, and shifting the entire row a little bit to the left because of it. And while this seems to be a minute change, this does affect your typing experience and it will take a little bit of time to getting used to, just like on the GK64. Design-wise, the case is simple with a very thick white plastic casing, with 4 rubber feet on bottom with no height adjustment. Around the sides are neatly edged bezels with a high wall as it is a high profile keyboard. And off to the side you'll find that this keyboard uses USB-C. And if we plug it in, we'll also find out that the keyboard is RGB compatible. And if you want to cycle through the various RGB patterns, you can cycle through them with the secondary functions, which if you haven't noticed by now, aren't printed on the keycap. So while you will have to refer to the little instruction packet that comes with this keyboard every now and then, this does help the keyboard look a lot cleaner. With that aside, the keyboard is Bluetooth compatible, but there's no actual on and off switch. You'll have to access this by turning it on and off with FN spacebar, which will then allow you to connect to up to 3 different devices with FN-Z, X, and C. The battery seems to always be engaged even if Bluetooth is off, so it only lasts about a couple days with RGB off. Functionality aside, let's get into a sound test. At stock, the thock is pretty good, but let's see what we can do to it. If you know me by now, we're gonna take apart this keyboard to essentially lube the stabs and see if we can make any improvements. But I also want to talk about these Gateron optical switches. All we gotta do is pop them out the board as it is a hot swap board and take a look. At first glance, it looks like your standard MX style switch, until we look at the bottom, where you'll notice it's missing the typical 2-pin contacts. As for the design of this switch, the switch basically when you press down the stem, it'll block a laser that's produced by the keyboard itself on the PCB. But this also means that this type of switch will only work on this style of PCB, and the PCB can only use this style of switch. While this means you have a very limited amount of switches you can actually use with this board, the Gateron optical switches are actually very good. The lack of metal leaves inside their linear switches led to less friction and therefore a much smoother experience with a stock switch. Now with the switches aside, we can take apart the rest of the board, but we'll have to remove all the screws first, allowing us to lift the metal top plate and the PCB together as they are attached together still, revealing a 1900 mAh battery, which will disconnect from the main PCB so we can take a look at the case itself, which we'll notice is very hollow. And because of that, I'll be sticking on some foam to help with the reverb that might occur. Link in the description for what foam I used. Moving on to the metal top plate and PCB, they are attached to each other from the back, so we are going to have to unscrew it before we can actually access the PCB itself. That way we can take a look at its unique design, as the main board is waterproof, so you don't gotta worry about spilling drinks onto it. Can't say the same for the battery though, so don't push it. Back to the main board itself, we can actually see how the keyboard will actuate, as it actually creates a laser from these 2 points that when blocked by pressing down the switch will lead to an actuation. Now onto the stabilizers. As you may notice, they are pre-lubed, but they're honestly kind of messily done and not done very well, so I would recommend re-lubing them. Now I do recommend taking apart the whole board because some of the stabs are hard to take out due to the LED blocking the bar. Don't want to bend them now. Now once we got the foam in, the stabs lubed, the key switches back in, and the keycaps back on, we can do a sound test. With foam in it, the thocky sounds are definitely higher than they were before, so honestly I might be taking the foam out because personally I like a deeper sound. So whether or not you put in foam or not is definitely up to you at this point. Spacebar stab's still a bit rattly, but there's only so much I can do with that, and honestly it's not that bad, but I wish it could be a little bit better. But let's see how this does in gaming. Now when it comes to gaming, I decided to use the keyboard wirelessly because it does use Bluetooth 5.0, which means the latency is actually fairly low. I personally didn't really have any problems with latency, as I didn't even notice any latency because it was just that low. My overall gaming experience with this keyboard was really good, and this might be due to the fact that the switches are optical switches, being not only very smooth but also pretty responsive. And something I noticed about this this keyboard that I also noticed on the GK64 that I had in the past is that the overall gaming experience felt more comfortable due to the fact that the shift key row shifts the entire row a little to the left, allowing my fingers to not have to travel as much when I need to reach that row to hit Z, X, C, or V. So while the format is a little awkward at first when it comes to regular typing, it actually fits right in for gaming. All in all, this board is actually really nice, even when it was stock. Granted, I do think you should at the very least lube the stabilizers, but that's something I say about basically every keyboard out there, so, you know, that's just the thing when it comes to keyboards. Lube your stabs. Always. That aside, the thok of this keyboard is very nice, and I think it has to do something with the plastic on this board being very thick, and probably also something to do with the optical switches that it uses. And I think that's what really does it for this board, because these optical switches by Gateron are just really smooth and responsive as you would expect from an optical switch. Though it does bring some concerns, such as, if there's a problem with a switch, it might not be the switch, it could actually be the PCB and the laser itself. But on the other hand, I'm not too worried about the PCB, as it is touted to be waterproof, so I would expect it to be pretty durable. If there's ever a problem down the line with the PCB or like the switch when it comes to like actuating, I think all you'd need is like a compressed air can to blow out any dust that might be in the way and you'd be good to go. But honestly, only time and usage will tell. Now while this board does have Bluetooth and the latency on it's pretty good, I found it to be a little bit fiddly because I have to use FN space to turn it on and off, which wasn't always ideal, because sometimes I just didn't know if it was ready or not. I would have much preferred having like a switch on the back just so I'm absolutely sure if it's on or off, you know? Maybe that's just me. As I mentioned before, it does have that squeezed in format, so while you do get the benefits of having like a keyboard that's the size of a 60% keyboard, you may run into a little bit of trouble looking for keycaps for it, because the shift key over here is a smaller than usual 2U keycap, and it's kind of hard to come by these guys, honestly. Finding a keycap set that completely works with this board might be a little bit challenging, but on the bright side, there are keycap sets that are specifically designed for this board. And also due to the smaller size of this shift key, the entire row, like I said before, is shifted over, so when you're typing, it might feel a little bit strange and you might have a few mispresses within the first week, but after a while, you do get used to it. On the other hand, because of this shift, it causes a more grid-like design, and I think that's actually more favorable and comfortable for gaming. So it's like a very much give or take thing. But honestly, it's very much up to, you know, user preference. If you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. When it comes to the format of this board, it might be perfect for you. It might not be perfect for you. It really depends on you. All that said, this keyboard runs at $80 on Banggood.com. I'm going to leave you a link in the description in case you want to buy it. And honestly, that's pretty much all I got for this keyboard today. So I hope this has helped you out with your buying decisions and whether or not you want to buy this, or maybe you want to buy it in a different colorway, which will also be within the link down in the description. Anyway, this has been good, guys, and I'll see you next time.